dawn light illuminated the Harrington mansion when Claire woke up alone in the king-size bed she shared with Grant. She had become accustomed to waking up alone lately, with her husband leaving increasingly early to solve problems at the family businesses. Today, however, he had another commitment. Grant had gone to the doctor for yet another battery of fertility tests. After almost 2 years of trying to get pregnant without success, doctors were beginning to investigate possible causes for the difficulty. "I can't take this pressure anymore. These tests, these questions about when we're going to have children. We've been trying for so long. It seems like this will never happen," thought Claire as she got up with difficulty, feeling her stomach turn. Claire walked to the ensuite bathroom, observing her reflection in the mirror. Her brown eyes looked tired, the result of sleepless nights worrying about the future. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders without its former shine. She had lost weight in recent weeks, but strangely, her belly seemed slightly more prominent. Perhaps it was just her imagination, a foolish hope that her body was finally responding to the treatments. Grant deserves a child. "He would be a wonderful father," she murmured while washing her face, feeling another wave of nausea take over her body. The nausea came strong and sudden, making Claire lean over the toilet. It was the 3rd consecutive morning she felt sick. At first, she thought it might be a virus, then considered that perhaps it was the stress caused by the constant pressure from Vivian, Grant's mother, who despised her daughter-in-law so much that she made it clear she would never accept her son's relationship with a woman who hadn't been born into a family with a noble surname. But now an idea was beginning to form in her mind, a possibility that she dared not feed with too much enthusiasm so as not to be disappointed again. Could it be this nausea? Is it possible? After so many frustrated attempts, she thought, as she opened the drawer under the sink and took out a small package she had bought the previous week, but hadn't yet had the courage to use. With trembling hands, Claire took the pregnancy test, meticulously following the instructions on the packaging. Each second of waiting seemed eternal as she observed the small display. When the 2 pink lines appeared, she had to lean on the edge of the sink to avoid falling. It wasn't an impression or a wish. It was real. She was pregnant. "My God, it's true. I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. How happy Grant will be when he finds out. Claire allowed herself a moment to absorb the news, gently touching her still flat belly. After so many months of disappointment, each negative test undermining her hopes a little more, she had finally succeeded. Grant was at the doctor at that exact moment, probably receiving guidance on next steps in fertility treatment, not knowing that the miracle had already happened. "I need to plan how I'll tell him. So I want it to be special, unforgettable," thought Claire, keeping the test in her robe pocket while trying to control her emotion. The sound of the front door opening interrupted her thoughts. It couldn't be Grant. It was too early for his return from the appointment. Quickly, Claire checked her appearance in the mirror, adjusted her robe, and went downstairs to discover who had arrived. Upon reaching the entrance hall, her stomach sank when she recognized the impeccably dressed figure of Vivian Harrington. "Where is my son?" asked Vivian without even greeting her, removing her Italian leather gloves while examining Claire from head to toe with evident disapproval. Vivian Harrington was the embodiment of traditional aristocracy. At 65, she maintained the straight posture and elegant bearing that made her stand out at social events. Her grey hair was always impeccably arranged, and her face, despite the marks of time, showed the classic beauty features that once made her one of the most coveted women in high society. Her blue eyes, identical to Grant's, possessed the coldness of constant calculation. "Good morning to you too, Vivian." Grant went to the doctor for tests. "He should be back in a few hours," replied Claire, trying to maintain her composure in front of the mother-in-law, who never made an effort to hide her contempt for her. Vivian walked through the hall as if inspecting a newly acquired property, her heels echoing on the polished marble. Every detail of that house had been chosen by her decades ago when she married the Harrington family patriarch. To Vivian, Claire was just a temporary intruder in that family sanctuary, someone her son would soon tire of. "Exams? What exams?" "He didn't tell me anything about being sick," questioned Vivian, leaving her designer bag on the center table and staring at Claire with suspicion. Claire hesitated for a moment. The couple's fertility problems weren't something she wanted to discuss with Vivian, especially now that she knew she was pregnant. Knowing her mother-in-law, she would use any information as a weapon in the future. They're just routine exams. Nothing to worry about, Claire lied, crossing her arms over her chest in an unconscious protective gesture. Can I offer you some coffee while you wait? Vivian ignored the offer, walking toward the stairs as if Claire were just another decoration item. Before going up, she turned with a cold smile on her red-painted lips. I see you still haven't dressed properly, even though it's almost noon. My son needs a wife with more refinement, don't you think? Someone who honors the name she carries, not a poor girl like you with no possessions and no family name to uphold, Vivian commented, each word distilling venom disguised as maternal concern. Claire felt her face burn with humiliation. Even after 2 years of marriage, Vivian's comments still managed to hit her like precise arrows. The worst part was knowing that for her mother-in-law, she would never be good enough for Grant, regardless of what she did. I'll go upstairs to change. Excuse me, said Claire with all the dignity she could muster, passing by Vivian on the staircase. Upon reaching the bedroom, Claire closed the door and took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions. The joy of discovering her pregnancy now mingled with the anxiety provoked by Vivian's unexpected presence. She decided to take a quick shower and dress appropriately before going downstairs again. In the bathroom, she took the pregnancy test out of her robe pocket and contemplated it once more, as if she needed to confirm she wasn't dreaming. This baby will change everything. Vivian will have to accept me when she knows I'm carrying her grandchild, Claire reflected, storing the test in the dresser drawer under some clothes. After her shower, Claire chose a simple but elegant dress, one of those that Grant had insisted she buy when they got married. She never felt comfortable with expensive clothes, preferring more practical and unpretentious pieces that reflected her humble origins. Today, however, she wanted to look presentable to face Vivian. She went upstairs feeling more confident, but didn't find her mother-in-law in the TV room. Following the noise coming from the second-floor guest bathroom, she approached cautiously. The door was ajar, and through it Claire could see Vivian holding something in her hands, her pregnancy test, which she had left on the sink earlier, forgotten in the moment of shock at the positive result. Claire's heart raced. This wasn't how she had planned for the news to be revealed. She wanted to tell Grant first, to see the joy in his eyes, to share this long-awaited moment with him. Vivian turned slowly, her face an impenetrable mask as she held the small object as if it was something repugnant. So, this is what you're plotting? Getting pregnant to secure your place in the family and in the will? Vivian's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. Very convenient, isn't it? A poor woman like you getting pregnant with an heir to an empire. Claire felt her blood freeze in her veins at the cruel insinuation. For the first time, she realized the true extent of the hatred Vivian harbored for her. It wasn't just disapproval or snobbery. It was a deep and calculated contempt. I'm not plotting anything. This baby is the fruit of love between Grant and me, Claire responded, striving to keep her voice steady despite the tremor that was beginning to take over her body. Vivian let out a dry laugh, devoid of any humor. Her eyes examined Claire like a predator, evaluating its prey, calculating the right moment for the final strike. Love? Don't be naive. My son may have been deceived by your innocent appearance, but I know exactly what kind of woman you are. An opportunist who saw in Grant the chance to climb socially, said Vivian, approaching dangerously. And now you think a baby will solidify your position, that it will guarantee a part of the Harrington fortune. Claire took a step back, instinctively protecting her womb with her hands. There was something in Vivian's gaze that went beyond the usual contempt, something dark and threatening that made all her survival instincts go on alert. I don't care about the fortune, I never cared. I love your son, and this baby is everything we've always dreamed of, declared Claire, backing up another step until she felt the edge of the staircase against her back. Vivian's face contorted into an expression Claire had never seen before. For a brief moment, the mask of elegance and control fell, revealing the pure hatred that consumed her inside. Vivian advanced, holding the pregnancy test so tightly that her knuckles whitened. You will never be a Harrington, and this child doesn't have to exist, Vivian hissed, moving even closer. Claire realized too late the intention in her mother-in-law's eyes. When she tried to dodge, she felt Vivian's hands pushing her down the stairs with surprising strength for a woman of her age. The world seemed to spin in slow motion as Claire lost her balance at the top of the monumental staircase. Her feet left the ground, and for a terrible instant she floated in the air, aware of the danger that threatened not only her life, but also that of the baby she had just discovered she was carrying. My baby, no, was the only thought she could form before her body began rolling down the marble steps. Claire desperately tried to protect herself, curling up in an instinctive attempt to shield her womb. Each impact against the steps sent waves of pain through her body, but all she could think about was the small life inside her that she needed to protect at all costs. The world spun chaotically around her. When she finally stopped on the intermediate landing of the staircase, Claire was semi-conscious, her body too painful to move. Through blurred vision, she saw Vivian at the top of the stairs, impassive, adjusting her expensive coat as if nothing had happened. There was no remorse or concern on her face, only a calculating coldness that sent chills down Claire's spine. You tripped. It was an unfortunate accident. Nobody will believe any other version, Vivian said calmly, her tone casual as if commenting on the weather. Especially not my son. Claire tried to respond, but her mind was numb. She felt something warm flowing between her legs, and a tremor ran through her entire body. She couldn't lose this baby, not now that she had finally managed to get pregnant. She tried to move, but each movement intensified the searing pain that ran through her body. Please, my baby, she managed to murmur, extending her hand in a pleading gesture toward Vivian, who was already descending the steps with calculated elegance. Vivian passed by Claire as if she were merely an inconvenient obstacle in her path, not even deigning to look at her fallen daughter-in-law. Her firm steps echoed on the marble as she walked away toward the living room, leaving Claire alone, injured and desperate. The pain in Claire's abdomen increased with each second, as did her fear. With superhuman effort, she tried to reach the cell phone in her dress pocket, but her fingers were too numb to hold the device. Consciousness began to slip away, the world darkening at the edges of her vision. Grant. Our baby. Please come soon, was her last conscious thought before darkness enveloped her completely, her body motionless on the landing of the Harrington mansion staircase, while a red stain began to soil the light dress over her knees. At the top of the stairs, the pregnancy test lay abandoned, its two bright pink lines confirming the life that now struggled to survive, ignorant of the hatred that had almost extinguished it before it even had a chance to flourish. The sound of keys in the lock of the front door echoed through the silent mansion. Grant Harrington entered the entrance hall with heavy steps, his face marked by fatigue and a somber expression that reflected the news he had just received from the doctor. He placed the leather briefcase on the side table and loosened his expensive tie, feeling the weight of the devastating diagnosis on his shoulders. He had expected to find the house empty. He needed time to process the devastating information before sharing it with Claire. He had just discovered that he was sterile, that he could never conceive a child naturally. Years of attempts, treatments, and hopes had been destroyed with a few cold words and a paper with incontestable results. How am I going to tell this to Claire? She dreams so much of being a mother, and I just discovered that I can never give that to her, thought Grant, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of deep frustration. The silence of the mansion was broken by a low, painful moan coming from the staircase. Grant froze, alert, before running toward the sound. What he saw made his blood freeze. Claire was lying on the intermediate landing of the stairs, pale, semi-conscious, a dark stain spreading across the light fabric of her dress. In an instant, he was beside her, kneeling carefully so as not to move her, his heart beating erratically with fear. Claire, my God, what happened? Talk to me, please, begged Grant, gently touching his wife's face while looking for signs of consciousness. Claire's eyes trembled slightly before opening, unfocused with pain. Her lips were dry and pale, contrasting with their normally rosy coloration. She tried to speak, but only a moan escaped her throat. With visible effort, her eyes finally focused on Grant's face, and a shadow of relief passed over her features, contorted with pain. Grant, your mother pushed me down the stairs, Claire mumbled, her voice almost inaudible. her fingers weakly grasping the sleeve of his jacket. "I'm pregnant." She discovered the baby and pushed me. Claire's words hit Grant like a physical blow. Pregnant? His mother pushed her? His mind tried to process the information while observing the dark stain on her dress. The diagnosis he had just received echoed in his mind, cruelly contradicting Claire's statement. The initial confusion quickly gave way to growing suspicion, a poison spreading through his veins. "Pregnant? What are you talking about?" "I just came from the doctor, Claire. I'm sterile." "Completely sterile," Grant said, his voice hardening with each word, moving slightly away from her. "Whose child is it that you claim to be carrying?" The shock on Claire's face would be indescribable. Even through the fog of pain that enveloped her, she understood what his words meant. She tried to sit up, but a sharp stab of pain made her groan and bring her hand to her belly. The bleeding was increasing, and fear for the baby momentarily overshadowed the pain of the veiled accusation. "No, Grant, you don't understand. I took the test this morning. It was positive. Your mother saw it and pushed me." Claire tried to explain, the words coming out broken by pain. "Please, I need to go to the hospital. I'm losing our baby." Grant stood up, backing away, as if her touch burned him. His face, normally gentle, was transformed by a cold anger that Claire had never seen before. He looked at the top of the stairs, noticing the small plastic object on the floor, the pregnancy test. He quickly climbed the steps and picked it up, observing the 2 pink lines that confirmed the pregnancy. The proof was there, in his hands, along with the medical diagnosis in his pocket. 2 incompatible truths. "Our baby? How can it be our baby when I've just found out I can't have children?" questioned Grant, his voice rising dangerously. "How long did you think you could hide this from me? Or was it deliberate? Getting pregnant by another man to secure your place in the Harrington family fortune?" The sound of heels on the marble floor announced Vivian's presence even before she appeared in the hall. She observed the scene with a perfectly rehearsed expression of concern, hurrying toward her son with outstretched arms, completely ignoring Claire lying on the stairs. "Grant, darling, how good that you arrived." It was terrible. She fell down the stairs, so careless. "She was running and tripped," said Vivian, her voice laden with false concern. "I was about to call an ambulance." Claire tried to protest, but a new wave of pain silenced her. Grant looked from his mother to his wife, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He wanted to believe Claire, wanted to trust that there was some explanation for the pregnancy that didn't involve betrayal. But the diagnosis was clear, and his mother had never lied to him, had never disappointed him unlike all the other people in his life. "Grant, please, your mother is lying." She saw the test. "Said I would never be a Harrington," Claire begged, tears streaming down her pale face, mixing with the cold sweat of shock. "Please believe me." Vivian approached her son, placing a hand on his shoulder in a gesture of maternal support. Her eyes, so similar to Grant's, observed Claire with a gleam of triumph that only her daughter-in-law could see. She knew she had won, that Grant would never believe Claire over her. "She's confused from the fall, son. But now I understand why she was so strange today." "A baby that can't be yours," said Vivian softly, as if revealing a painful truth to protect her son. "I always suspected she wasn't worthy of the Harrington name." Grant's mind was at war. The love he felt for Claire fought against the incontrovertible evidence of his sterility, against the subtle poison of his mother's words, against the primitive fear of betrayal. He looked again at Claire, so fragile and pale on the floor, and something inside him hardened. "I'll call an ambulance for you," he finally said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "But when this is over, I want you to tell me the truth. I won't remain married to someone I can't trust." Claire felt the world crumbling around her. Not only was she possibly losing the miracle baby she had just discovered, but she was also losing the man she loved, who refused to believe her at the most critical moment. The physical pain was almost insignificant compared to the emotional agony consuming her. "Grant, I'm begging you, believe me. I never betrayed you," whispered Claire, reaching out to him one last time, only to see him step away with contempt. The ambulance arrived in record time, the result of a call from the influential Grant Harrington. The paramedics worked efficiently, stabilizing Claire and placing her on the stretcher with professional care. They asked about what had happened, about the pregnancy, about the bleeding. Grant answered mechanically, as if speaking about a stranger and not the woman who until a few hours ago was the center of his world. She fell down the stairs. "She's pregnant, apparently, but I don't know how far along," Grant informed coldly, avoiding looking at his wife. Claire tried to protest, tried to reach him one last time, but Grant had already turned away, climbing the stairs without looking back. Her last vision before the ambulance doors closed was of Vivian, standing in the entrance hall, a subtle and victorious smile on her thin lips. In that moment, Claire knew she would never be safe in that house again. She could never protect her baby from the threat that Vivian represented. My baby. I have to protect my baby, thought Claire, a resolution forming in her mind confused by pain. If Grant doesn't believe me, I can't trust him to protect us. At the hospital, Claire was quickly taken to the emergency room. Doctors and nurses moved around her in a coordinated and efficient dance, connecting monitors, checking vital signs, applying medications to stop the bleeding. A young doctor with kind eyes held her hand while explaining they would do an ultrasound to check the baby's condition. "Please, save my baby. It's all I have left now," begged Claire, clutching the doctor's hand desperately. "I've already lost my husband today. I can't lose my child too." The ultrasound room was cold and impersonal, but the doctor maintained a calm and reassuring expression while applying the gel to Claire's slightly swollen belly. The moments that followed were the longest of her life, watching the monitor attentively for any sign that her baby had survived the fall. "Interesting," muttered the doctor, adjusting the equipment and observing the screen with redoubled attention. "Mrs. Harrington, you said you just discovered the pregnancy today, correct?" Claire nodded, fear growing in her chest at the doctor's concentrated expression. Was something wrong with the baby? Had the fall caused irreparable damage? She closed her eyes, preparing for the worst. "Well, I have two pieces of news for you," continued the doctor, a genuine smile softening her features. "First, your baby, or rather, your babies are fine. The bleeding was superficial, it didn't affect the placenta. Second, you're expecting triplets. 3 perfectly healthy girls." The shock on Claire's face gave way to incredulous joy. Triplets? 3 babies? The mathematical impossibility of that situation, considering Grant's diagnosis, was even more astonishing. How could she explain this to him? Make him believe the babies were really his? "3 girls, are you sure?" asked Claire, her voice choked with emotion. "How is this possible if my husband just received a diagnosis of sterility?" The doctor frowned, adjusting the equipment again before responding with professional care. "Medical diagnoses aren't always absolute, Mrs. Harrington. There are cases of men with sperm counts so low they're considered sterile, but who still manage to conceive," she explained patiently. 3 babies at once is rare, but not impossible. Considering the size of the fetuses, I'd say you're approximately 8 weeks pregnant. 8 weeks. Claire quickly did the mental calculation. It was exactly 2 months ago that Grant and she had spent a romantic weekend celebrating their wedding anniversary. The last time they were truly happy together before the pressure for an heir began to deteriorate their relationship. "You'll need to stay under observation tonight. The fall was serious, and we need to monitor the fetal heartbeats to ensure everything continues to be fine," the doctor informed firmly. "I can call your husband to come here if you want." Claire hesitated. If Grant came to the hospital, would he bring Vivian with him? Would he put her daughters in danger again? The memory of the look of pure hatred in her mother-in-law's eyes and the sensation of her hands pushing her made Claire tremble. No, she couldn't risk it. She needed to protect her daughters at all costs. "He'll come later." "I need to rest a bit first," lied Claire, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Could you just bring me a glass of water, please?" As soon as the doctor left, Claire quickly assessed her situation. She was alone without her own resources, carrying 3 lives that depended exclusively on her to survive. Grant didn't believe her, and Vivian would certainly try again if she knew the fall hadn't managed to eliminate the babies. She had no family to turn to, no close friends who could help her face the Harringtons' power. "I need to protect my daughters," Claire decided, feeling a determination growing within her, replacing the fear and pain. When the nurse came to check her vital signs 2 hours later, Claire pretended to be in a deep sleep. She waited for the professional to leave and, ignoring the pain still throbbing in her body, carefully got out of bed. She found her stained clothes in a nearby cabinet and hurriedly put them on, grateful she had kept some money in her pocket that morning. "I need to choose our daughters above everything," whispered Claire to the empty room. The hospital was busy, which facilitated her escape. Claire avoided the main elevators and used the service stairs, keeping her head down to avoid being recognized. Her heart was racing, not only from the physical effort but from the fear of being discovered and the weight of the decision she was making. She was leaving behind her entire life, her husband, her home, everything she knew. "You are my life now, my little ones. We'll find a safe place far from here where no one will hurt you anymore," she silently promised the 3 lives she carried, gently touching her belly as she slipped through the back door of the hospital. The security cameras captured only a woman with her head down, hurriedly leaving through the service door, without showing her face, disappearing into the night like a ghost. When the nurse returned to the room to check Claire's vital signs, she found only the empty bed, the rumpled sheets the only evidence that someone had been there. "Doctor, the patient in room 204 is gone," exclaimed the alarmed nurse, initiating a search that would prove fruitless. Meanwhile, under the light rain that was beginning to fall, Claire moved away from the hospital with determined steps, a protective hand over her belly. She didn't know where she was going, but she was absolutely certain of one thing. She would make any sacrifice to protect her daughters, even if it meant never seeing the man she had married again. "Goodbye, Grant. One day perhaps you'll discover the mistake you made," she murmured into the night, her tears mixing with the rain as she left behind everything she knew, taking with her only the hope represented by the 3 little lives growing inside her. The news of Claire's disappearance from the hospital spread like wildfire. Grant Harrington was in his office when he received the call. His face, already marked by anger and disappointment from the previous hours, transformed into a mask of disbelief. He had planned to go to the hospital that morning, determined to inform Claire that he wanted an immediate divorce, that he would not tolerate the humiliation of raising another man's child. Now standing amid the opulence of his office with the phone still in his hand, he felt something different emerging beneath the surface of anger, a twinge of concern that he couldn't completely suppress. "Missing? What do you mean, missing?" "It's a hospital, not an amusement park. How does a patient simply disappear?" questioned Grant, his voice rising with each word, drawing curious glances from his team through the glass walls. The police chief listened patiently to Grant's demands. Seated in his worn chair, he observed the millionaire who entered his station as if he owned the place. Despite the impeccable suit and arrogant posture, there was something in Grant's look that the chief recognized immediately. The disguised fear of a man whose world was crumbling. Grant demanded immediate action, wanted all resources to be mobilized to find Claire, his voice alternating between accusations of irresponsibility and contradictory statements about the situation. "Mr. Harrington, we're doing everything we can. We've already checked the hospital security cameras and saw your wife voluntarily leaving through the back door," explained the chief, carefully observing Grant's reaction. "If she decided to leave on her own accord, you understand that complicates the investigation." Grant's initial anger began to mix with confusion. In the 48 hours following the disappearance, he personally led the searches, hiring private investigators and offering substantial rewards for any information. His office quickly transformed into an improvised operations center, with maps, photographs, and reports scattered everywhere. He slept only a few hours each night, waking up startled with nightmares in which Claire called for him, begging for help that he refused to give. Why would she run away? She was pregnant, injured. "It doesn't make sense to leave the hospital in that condition," Grant muttered to himself while studying the security camera footage for the 100th time. Unless she was so afraid that staying seemed more dangerous than fleeing. 1 week after the disappearance, Grant returned to the mansion, exhausted and frustrated by the lack of progress. Upon entering the hall, his eyes were inevitably drawn to the staircase where he had found Claire collapsed. Something on the landing caught his attention, a small shiny object, almost imperceptible between the marble joints. He knelt down, taking the object between his fingers. A mother-of-pearl button with golden details, unmistakably from the exclusive coat his mother was wearing on the day of the accident. The same coat that Vivian had claimed not to be wearing that afternoon. Why would my mother lie about something as trivial as the clothes she was wearing? Why would a button from her coat be exactly where Claire fell? Grant questioned himself, feeling the first tremor of doubt about the version of events he had accepted as truth. The confrontation with Vivian happened at dinner that night. The imposing table that normally accommodated 16 people seemed absurdly large for just mother and son. Vivian ate calmly, commenting on social commitments and details of company management, as if nothing extraordinary was happening, as if her daughter-in-law hadn't disappeared, as if her son wasn't falling apart before her eyes. Grant observed his mother, noticing for the first time small details that previously went unnoticed. The calculating coldness in her eyes, the way she avoided certain subjects, the complete absence of empathy. "Mother, I found this today. At the exact spot where Claire fell," Grant finally said, placing the button on the table with a small metallic sound. "It's from your exclusive spring collection coat, the one you said you weren't wearing that day." Vivian's reaction was subtle but revealing. For a fraction of a second, her mask of composure faltered. Her fingers slightly tightened on the linen napkin, and her eyes, so similar to her son's, momentarily avoided his. She recovered quickly, returning to display her usual controlled expression. But the damage was done. Grant had seen the truth in her brief moment of vulnerability. "How absurd, Grant. I probably lost that button on another day." "You know how careless the cleaning staff has been lately," Vivian replied, bringing the wine glass to her lips to disguise the slight tremor in her voice. "I really don't understand why you're so obsessed with this matter." In the weeks that followed, Grant began to mentally reconstruct the events of that fateful day, recalling every detail with new eyes. The way he found Claire, her desperate words, the accusation against his mother that he had so readily dismissed. The coincidence of the sterility diagnosis on the same day as the discovery of Claire's pregnancy. His mother's behavior, always so perfect and controlled. Small inconsistencies began to accumulate, feeding a doubt that grew each day. What if she was telling the truth? What if the doctor was wrong about my condition? What if that really was my child? These questions tormented Grant as he reviewed his medical test results, looking for any possibility of error. 1 month after the disappearance, Grant finally confronted Vivian directly. He found her in the mansion's winter garden, apparently serene while arranging rare orchids in Chinese porcelain vases. He approached with determination, holding in his hands a folder with documents that could change everything. He had consulted another specialist, who explained that even with his diagnosis, there was a minimal, almost miraculous chance of natural conception. Statistically improbable, but not impossible. "You pushed Claire down the stairs that day, didn't you?" Grant asked bluntly, his voice controlled but charged with a cold anger that made Vivian immediately stop what she was doing. "You discovered the pregnancy, and couldn't bear the idea of an heir who would dilute your control over the family fortune." The silence that followed was more revealing than any verbal confession. Vivian slowly placed the gardening scissors on the table, her posture still perfect, but a new tension evident in her shoulders. When he finally turned to face his son, his face was composed in a studied expression of indignation, but his eyes revealed something Grant had never seen before: fear. "How dare you insinuate such absurdity? Everything I did was to protect you from that opportunist who got pregnant by another man to secure her place in our family," replied Vivian, her voice slightly higher pitched than normal. "You saw the results of your tests, Grant. You are sterile." The rupture was inevitable and definitive. That same night, Grant ordered Vivian to leave the mansion immediately. He cut off her access to the family bank accounts, removed her from the board of Harrington Companies, and prohibited her entry to any property or business related to the family. Vivian's face, normally so controlled, contorted into a mask of hatred and disbelief when she understood that, for the first time in his life, her son was truly challenging her authority. "You will regret this, Grant. When you realize your mistake, I'll be waiting for your apology," were Vivian's last words before leaving the mansion, carrying only a few hastily packed suitcases. The search for Claire intensified after the break with Vivian. Grant dedicated practically all his time to the search, neglecting business, health, and social relationships. He hired the best private investigators in the country, offered increasingly larger rewards, personally followed any lead, however tenuous. He slept little, ate poorly, and visibly lost weight. Guilt consumed him from within, transforming the once confident and authoritative man into a tormented shadow of himself. How could I have been so blind? How could I have chosen to believe her instead of the woman I loved? Grant lamented while studying a map marked with possible locations where Claire might be hiding. I need to find her. I need to beg for her forgiveness. 6 months after her disappearance, when the searches were beginning to lose momentum due to the absence of concrete clues, the police found a dress that Claire frequently wore and her wallet with documents on a remote bank of the river that cut through the region. The current was known for its strength and danger, having claimed numerous imprudent swimmers over the years. Despite the absence of a body, the circumstantial evidence was strong enough for authorities to declare Claire as presumably dead. Presumably dead? What does that mean exactly? That you're giving up? Grant questioned the sheriff, his voice heavy with desperation and revolt. I don't accept this. I'll continue searching even if I'm alone. Grant refused to accept the official conclusion. For him, as long as there wasn't a body, there was hope. He continued financing private searches for more than a year, following increasingly tenuous and improbable leads. In his obsession, he had a memorial garden built at the back of the mansion, with a symbolic tombstone where he spent hours every day, talking to Claire as if she could hear him, begging for her forgiveness, promising that he would eventually find her. I won't give up on you, Claire. I know you're alive somewhere, and I'll find you even if it's the last thing I do in this life, Grant murmured to the empty tombstone while leaving fresh roses, her favorites, on the cold marble. 2 years turned into 3, then into 5. Gradually, even Grant had to accept the possibility that he might never find Claire. The active searches diminished, although they never completely ceased. He reluctantly returned to managing the family business, but did so mechanically, without the passion and ambition of before. His social life became practically non-existent. He vehemently refused any attempts by friends to introduce him to potential partners, as if accepting the possibility of a new relationship would be a final betrayal to Claire's memory. How could I move forward when it was my distrust that destroyed everything? How could I deserve happiness after what I did? Reflected Grant as he observed the sunset alone from the veranda of his office, a ritual that became part of his solitary routine. The changes in Grant weren't just emotional, but also physical. His hair, previously only slightly gray at the temples, was now almost completely white. Deep lines marked his face, especially around his eyes and mouth, physical evidence of constant guilt and suffering. He had lost the gleam of confidence in his eyes, replaced by a permanent melancholy that even strangers noticed at first glance. Mr. Harrington, with all due respect, I think we need to consider the possibility of officially closing the case, suggested the private investigator he still kept on retainer after 7 years of fruitless searches. We have explored all viable possibilities. Perhaps it's time to accept and move on. Grant's life had become a predictable routine of work and isolation. He rarely socialized, avoided public events whenever possible, and kept himself distant from his former life. The only exception to his seclusion was the annual visit to the cemetery where Claire's parents were buried, on the anniversary of her disappearance. He felt he owed it to her, to honor the memory of her family, since he had failed so terribly to protect her. You deserved someone better than me, Grant would say, as he placed flowers on Claire's symbolic grave each year. Someone who would have trusted you unconditionally when you needed it most. 8 years had passed since the disappearance. The Harrington mansion, once a symbol of power and opulence, now seemed like a mausoleum where Grant merely existed without really living. He had transformed their former bedroom into a kind of sanctuary, keeping Claire's belongings intact, as if she might return at any moment. The house staff whispered about their master's increasingly eccentric behavior, about how he could sometimes be found talking to himself, as if conversing with someone only he could see. Sometimes I wonder if our babies would have had your eyes or mine, Claire, Grant would murmur, while looking at an old photograph of the couple, taken in happier times. I hope they would have had yours, always so sincere and full of life. On the morning of the 8th anniversary of Claire's disappearance, the sky dawned heavy with dark clouds, foreshadowing the storm that was forming. Grant watched the rain begin to fall as he prepared for his annual visit to the municipal cemetery. He dressed in the same dark suit he wore every year for the occasion, took the bouquet of white roses he had specially ordered, and drove his car personally, dismissing the driver as he always did on this particular day. Another year without answers, Claire. Another year carrying the weight of what I did to you, thought Grant, as he drove slowly under the intensifying rain, transforming the world into a grey blur through the windshield. The cemetery was practically deserted when he arrived, which was not surprising considering the downpour. Grant walked with slow steps along the soaked path, protecting the flowers under his black umbrella. He knew the way by heart, right after the great oak, then left at the third row to the symbolic grave he had commissioned for Claire after her declaration of presumed death. An elegant white marble headstone, always covered with fresh flowers, even without a body to guard. As he approached the familiar site, however, he noticed something unusual. 3 small silhouettes protected by colorful umbrellas standing before the grave he had come to visit. Who could those children be visiting Claire's grave on this specific day? Grant wondered, intrigued by the unexpected presence in a location so personal to him. Drawing closer, Grant could better distinguish the figures. They were 3 girls, apparently identical, approximately 8 years old. They wore colorful coats that contrasted with the cemetery's gray atmosphere, and chatted animatedly among themselves, seemingly oblivious to the rain falling around their umbrellas. Something about them, perhaps the way they tilted their heads when speaking, or the distant sound of their laughter, made Grant's heart skip a beat, as if recognizing something deeply familiar in these children he had never seen before. Grant felt time stop as he observed the 3 girls a few meters away. Something about them drew him in inexplicably, as if an instinct dormant for years suddenly awakened. The rain continued to fall mercilessly, but he barely noticed it now, completely absorbed in the sight of the children. His steps, hesitant before, became firmer as he approached, guided by a certainty he couldn't rationally explain. The girls still hadn't noticed his presence, engrossed in their animated conversation in front of the grave he had come to visit. Could it be possible that after so many years seeking answers, they simply appear like this, like a miracle amid the storm, thought Grant, his heart accelerating with each step. One of the girls gestured animatedly, explaining something to her sisters, and it was at that moment that Grant saw, clear as day, even under the grey light of the storm, a small crescent-shaped mark on the child's wrist. Identical to his own birthmark, that genetic peculiarity his father also possessed, and which he had always considered unique to his family. His knees nearly gave way with the impact of that sight. He froze in place, unable to continue moving forward, while his mind struggled to process what his eyes were witnessing. It can't be a coincidence. This mark has been hereditary in the Harrington family for generations, he muttered to himself, feeling his mouth go dry as an impossible suspicion began to form. It was the sound of his footsteps in the water, or perhaps a sixth sense that finally made the girls notice his presence. 3 identical pairs of eyes turned toward him simultaneously, with a synchronicity that would be almost comical in another situation. Grant held his breath as he carefully observed them. Their faces, perfect frames of innocence and curiosity, were an astonishing mixture of features. The shape of the chin just like his, the expressive eyes unmistakably like Claire's, the way one of them slightly tilted her head to the side while observing him, exactly as he did when intrigued by something. "Who are you, sir?" asked the middle girl, the tallest of the 3, with a confidence that reminded Grant of himself in childhood. "Are you lost? Nobody else comes to this side of the cemetery in the rain." Grant couldn't respond immediately. His voice seemed stuck in his throat, while he observed the 3 children who now stared at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. They were identical and yet distinct, subtleties in their expressions that spoke of unique personalities. The one who had spoken maintained a protective posture in front of the other 2, like a natural little leader. Another firmly held a book protected from the rain under her coat, her analytical eyes examining him with sharp intelligence. The third, slightly hidden behind her sisters, watched him with dreamy eyes, as if seeing beyond his physical appearance. "I'm not lost. Just surprised to find someone here today, Grant finally replied, his voice betraying the emotion he was trying to control. Do you come here often? The girl with the book stepped forward, adjusting the small, elegant glasses that framed her delicate face. Something in the way she moved, precise and careful, reminded Grant of himself during important meetings, when he weighed each word before speaking. We visit our grandparents' graves every year on this day. Our mother says it's important to keep the family memory alive, she explained, her voice clear and impressively articulated for a child of her age. Did you know our mother? The question, seemingly innocent, hit Grant like a physical blow. Did he know their mother? How to answer a question that opened an abyss of possibilities in his mind. Before he could formulate an answer, the dreamy girl, who until then had remained silent, approached with light, almost ethereal steps. Without warning, she extended her hand and lightly touched his arm, a surprisingly intimate and confident gesture. You have the same mark as us, she said softly, turning her own wrist to show a mark identical to the one Grant had seen on the other girl. Mommy said only very special people have this mark. People from the same family. The world seemed to spin around Grant, reality reconfiguring itself before his eyes. Were these children his daughters? The daughters Claire was carrying when she disappeared? The daughters he believed were the result of betrayal? The truth hit him with such force that his knees finally gave way, and he leaned heavily on the nearest tombstone to keep from falling. The girls exchanged concerned looks, clearly surprised by his reaction. Are you okay, sir? Should we call for help? Asked the leader, her confident expression momentarily replaced by genuine concern. Our mother is just over there, visiting another grave. Upon hearing the mention of their mother, all three turned simultaneously to look beyond Grant, their faces lighting up with identical smiles. It was at that moment that Grant felt a presence behind him and heard a voice he thought he would never hear again, the voice that had haunted him in dreams for 8 long years. Girls, who is this man you're talking to? Claire's voice, more mature but unmistakable, sounded a few steps away. I've told you not to talk to strangers. Grant turned slowly, fearing that if he moved too quickly, the apparition would vanish as in the countless dreams he had had over the years. But she was really there, as solid and real as the rain falling on them. Claire, his Claire, alive and breathing before his eyes. She was different, her hair shorter and in a different style, some fine lines around the eyes that weren't there before, a more confident and independent posture. But it was her without a shadow of doubt. Claire, was all he could say, his voice almost inaudible under the patter of rain on the umbrellas. It's really you. The recognition in her eyes was immediate, as was the transformation in her face, from a concerned maternal expression to a cautious, defensive mask. In a protective movement, she extended her arms, gathering her daughters to her side like a lioness protecting her cubs. Her eyes, those same eyes that once looked at him with so much love, now observed him with a mixture of shock, fear, and resolve. Grant, she responded simply, her voice controlled, not revealing the storm of emotions that clearly overwhelmed her inside. I didn't expect to see you here after so many years. The girls looked from Claire to Grant and back to their mother, their confused expressions gradually transforming into understanding. It was the dreamy girl who first connected the dots, her eyes widening with the revelation. Mom, is it him? Is he our father? Asked the dreamy girl, her voice low but perfectly audible in the tense silence that had settled. Is that why he has the same mark as us? The world stopped in that moment. The child's words hung in the air like a long-buried truth, finally coming to light. Grant felt his knees give way completely, and this time he couldn't support himself on anything. He fell to his knees on the muddy cemetery path, the bouquet of white roses forgotten at his side, staining with the wet earth. 8 years of guilt, of searching, of suffering culminated in this overwhelming moment of revelation. Daddy, what are you doing here at Mommy's grave? Asked the triplets, whom the sterile millionaire had never seen before, confused by the situation, as they realized he was visiting their mother's symbolic headstone. When they raised their wrists, clearly showing the birthmark, he felt the world spin and fainted, falling forward onto the muddy cemetery path. His last conscious thought was of pure disbelief at the revelation he had just experienced. My daughters. All this time, My daughters, he murmured before losing consciousness. When Grant regained consciousness, the first face he saw was Claire's, leaning over him with an expression that mixed reluctant concern and caution. He was lying on a covered bench in the cemetery, protected from the rain that continued to fall mercilessly. The girls were a few steps away, whispering among themselves and casting curious glances in his direction. It took a few seconds for the reality of the situation to hit him again. Claire was alive, and those 3 girls were his daughters. "You fainted," Claire said simply, moving away as soon as she realized he was conscious. The girls were frightened. Grant sat up slowly, feeling his head spin with the movement. His eyes couldn't leave the 3 girls, absorbing every detail of their features, recognizing parts of himself and Claire in each of them. It was like looking at a miracle materialized 3 times. They're my daughters. Our daughters, he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion, unable to formulate more complex thoughts. How is it possible? The doctor said I was sterile. Claire sighed deeply, as if gathering strength for an explanation she had mentally rehearsed for years, but never really expected to have to give. Her eyes softened slightly, perhaps due to the evident vulnerability on Grant's face. The doctors said your condition made conception almost impossible, not completely impossible, Claire explained, keeping her voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. 1 in a million were the exact words. It seems we won the genetic lottery 3 times. Grant looked again at the girls, who were now playing near a tree, apparently tired of waiting for the adults to resolve their complicated matters. The natural leader was organizing some kind of game, while the intellectual explained imaginary rules, and the dreamer contemplated the raindrops falling from the leaves, each one so unique, and yet, undeniably his daughters. Hope, Ella and Ruby, said Claire, following his gaze. Hope is the oldest by 2 minutes, always protecting her sisters. Ella is our little scientist, absorbs knowledge like a sponge. And Ruby, the youngest, lives in her own world of dreams and stories. The names fell like music to Grant's ears. He could finally associate identities with the 3 little lives that, unknowingly, he had helped create. A knot formed in his throat as he realized the lost years, the first steps he hadn't witnessed, the first words he hadn't heard, the birthdays he hadn't celebrated. Why, Claire? Why did you run away? Why did you let me believe you were dead all these years, he finally asked, the pain of 8 years of mourning emerging in his voice. I looked for you everywhere possible. Claire's face hardened again, the momentary vulnerability giving way to the resolution that had sustained her during the years of isolation. Her eyes, once soft, became sharp as blades when they met Grant's. Do you really need to ask? Your mother tried to kill me and your daughters. When I told the truth, you chose to believe her instead of me, she replied, each word loaded with the weight of the betrayal she had suffered. What choice did I have? Stay and risk her trying again, this time more successfully? The truth in her words was undeniable, and Grant felt the crushing weight of his renewed guilt. He remembered his mother's coat button found near the stairs, the inconsistencies in her story, the calculating coldness in her eyes when she spoke of Claire. How could he have been so blind? After you left the hospital, where did you go? How did you survive alone with 3 babies, he asked, trying to fill the gaps of the lost years. Why did you decide to come back right now? Claire looked at her daughters playing, a soft smile momentarily softening the hard lines of her face. For an instant, Grant glimpsed the woman he had fallen in love with so many years ago. Determined, strong, but with an immense heart capable of infinite love. I went to the countryside, to a small town where nobody asked questions. I worked 2 jobs while pregnant to save enough. After they were born, I sewed at home while taking care of them, Claire explained, a touch of pride evident in her voice. It was never easy, but we were happy. We still are. Grant absorbed every word, imagining Claire struggling alone to raise 3 children, without the comfort his fortune could provide, all because he failed to trust her when she needed it most. The shame he felt was almost unbearable. I never planned to return or let you find us, Claire continued, her voice softer now. But the girls started asking questions about their father. They deserved to know their origins, their complete history. It was Ruby who insisted we come today to visit my parents' grave. She's always had this strange intuition. Grant looked at the dreamy girl, Ruby, and something connected in his heart, as if an invisible thread had always existed between them, just waiting to be acknowledged. The same happened when he looked at Hope and Ella, each awakening an instant and overwhelming love he never imagined possible to feel. "Claire, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable," said Grant, his voice thick with emotion. "But I need you to know that I expelled my mother from my life soon after you disappeared. She's living abroad, completely cut off from any Harrington family resources." The surprise in Claire's eyes was evident. Clearly, this information contradicted what she had imagined during all these years, that Grant had chosen his mother above everything, that he had remained blind to the truth. "I found evidence that she had lied, and when I confronted her, I saw the truth in her eyes," he continued, the memories of that confrontation still vivid in his mind. "I spent 8 years looking for you, seeking a chance to beg for your forgiveness." The girls were now approaching again, tired of their improvised game, curious about the strange man who made their mother, usually so calm and composed, appear so agitated. Claire quickly wiped away a furtive tear before they could notice, composing herself with the strength she had developed as a single mother during those years. "Girls, this is Grant Harrington," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. He is your biological father." The reactions were as distinct as their personalities. Hope narrowed her eyes with protective suspicion. Ella analyzed Grant with scientific curiosity, as if he were a rare specimen, and Ruby simply smiled as if confirming something she had known for a long time. Grant felt his heart overflowing with emotion as he observed them, wanting to memorize every detail of their expressions, to compensate in seconds for the years of absence. "So that's why we have your birthmark?" asked Ella, always the analytical one, raising her wrist again. "Is it a dominant genetic trait transmitted through the paternal chromosome?" Grant couldn't contain a smile at the surprisingly technical question. "Yes, exactly that. My father had the same mark and his father before him," he replied, amazed at his daughter's evident intelligence. A silence loaded with possibilities settled between them. 8 years of separation, of lives built on different paths, couldn't be erased in one meeting. Claire had clearly created a stable life for herself and her daughters, a life that didn't include Grant. And yet, there they were, united by the indissoluble bond of the 3 children who watched them expectantly. "What happens now?" Grant finally asked, his voice low, addressing Claire more than the girls. "I want to know them, be part of their lives if you'll allow it." Claire looked long at her daughters, then at Grant, her expression complex and undecipherable. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm but no longer icy with the defensive anger from before. "I can't come back as your wife, Grant. That bridge was burned when you chose not to believe me," she said, looking him directly in the eyes without hesitation. "But our daughters deserve to know their father. Are you willing to be part of their lives?" A year later, the small house on the outskirts of town gleamed under the spring sun. The garden, once simple, now displayed colorful flower beds and a treehouse from which children's laughter escaped cheerfully. Claire watched from the porch as Grant tried to keep up with the elaborate game the triplets had invented, his face revealing the mixture of joy and fatigue of a father struggling to make up for lost time. "Dad, you have to spin 3 times before passing the ball," shouted Ella, adjusting her glasses with scientific authority. "Those are the rules we established initially." Grant obeyed, spinning comically and provoking laughter from the 3 girls. Hope, always the protector, ensured that everyone had equal opportunities in the game, while Ruby improvised a song about a dizzy father who couldn't follow simple rules. The scene was a portrait of family happiness, albeit unconventional. "He really tries," Claire commented to herself, a small smile playing on her lips. The path hadn't been easy. After the meeting at the cemetery, it took months of careful conversations, established boundaries, and slowly rebuilt trust. Grant had respected every term Claire established: scheduled visits, no extravagant gifts, and absolutely no attempt to interfere with her decisions about raising the girls. To Claire's surprise, he sold the Harrington mansion, that monument of marble and painful memories, and bought a modest house 15 minutes from where she and the girls lived. Close enough to be present in his daughters' lives, far enough to respect the space Claire needed. Vivian remained abroad, the relationship with her son irreparably broken. Grant had established a generous fund to ensure her comfort, but the conditions were clear. She could never return or attempt contact with the triplets. Claire continued her sewing work, refusing to be financially dependent on Grant. But she accepted his offer to finance the girls' education at the best school in the region, recognizing that it was their right, not a favor to her. "Mom, come play with us," called Ruby, running to the porch and pulling Claire by the hand. "We need you to be the impartial judge." Claire laughed, allowing herself to be dragged into the garden. "Impartial? You three know I always choose the side of the underdog, and right now your father seems desperately in need of help." Grant, pretending exhaustion, fell dramatically on the grass. "Help! I'm being defeated by the combined forces of the Harrington sisters." The girls jumped on him with shouts of victory, and Claire couldn't contain a genuine smile. Observing the scene, she realized how her definition of family had changed. It was no longer the traditional dream she had imagined years ago, but something new, built on honesty, respect, and clear boundaries. Grant had transformed. The arrogant man she had known gave way to someone more humble, more present, someone who valued every moment with his daughters as the precious gift it was. The pain of the past hadn't completely disappeared, but it had lost its power to define their future. Later, while the girls slept and Grant prepared to return to his house, they shared tea on the porch, as they often did after visits. "They asked if we could all go to the amusement park next weekend," Grant commented. "Is that okay with you?" Claire hesitated briefly before answering. "Yes, I think so, but don't get used to these all-together outings. We're not a couple." "I know," Grant responded softly, "but we are a family one way or another." Claire didn't disagree. As she watched Grant drive down the rural road, she reflected on how life took unexpected paths. She hadn't completely forgiven, perhaps she never would, but she had found peace in this new arrangement, seeing her daughter's joy in knowing their father, witnessing the genuine love he offered them. Some bridges once burned are never rebuilt in the same way, but sometimes from the ashes, something different emerges, not perfect, not as planned, but strong enough to bear the weight of new beginnings. Did you like the story of this story? Comment where you're from, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and check out the next one waiting for you here on screen. Don't forget to comment. I'll be waiting for you there.